The Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on KEVT Power Talk, 1210 a.m. here in Tucson. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And it's an honor of mine. Finally got it together to introduce a legendary percussionist who we were just listening to, a headhunter in New Orleans, Bill Summers. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you very much. Am I on the air?
We're on, baby. So
we're on, baby. We've been trying with Jay. We've been hitting and missing for a couple of times here, but we finally got it done.
Yeah, but I'm always connecting with you anyway, man. Because this morning I was in a thrift store digging around, and I found this Terry Garthwaite album. And there's Bill Summers.
Oh, my God.
All right. And I'm like, so Bill Summers, sometimes you hit, sometimes you miss, but then you connect on something like that. And the music, because the music transcends, and I think that that better than most people do. So it's an honor to talk to you, brother. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your program in New Orleans, about getting, I don't know what the right word is, the rudiments back, more kids playing instruments, knowing their roots. Just want you to talk about that program.
Now, what program, specifically, what program is that again?
The one that you're doing, the one that you're responsible for in New Orleans. About, I saw this clip of you on stage promoting one of your programs.
Yeah, I have several programs. So, yeah, I'm a community-based person.
Right. So,
and I do a lot of community stuff to bring the level of proficiency, not only as an artist playing an instrument, but also on the business side. So I'll tell you about a couple of projects. I have one that's called Club Kid, and club is spelled KLUB, and kid is an acronym for knowledge, independence, and determination. And what I do is I have a high school that I have my project in right now, Maine High School, which is basically an African-American high school here in New Orleans. It does have other ethnicities involved in it, but it's I would say 85% black, maybe 90. And so I had this idea some years ago to create a program that would educate young aspiring artists, and not just performers, but people who had interest in engineering or management or becoming an entertainment attorney or an engineer, because it takes a lot. Or a radio announcer, because there are many aspects to music. It's not the performer would be not in a good position if there were no one to listen to his performance.
That's right. That's very true. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I agree with you completely. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. So what I do is here's, as briefly as I can put it, here's what the goals of Club Kid are. We go into high school with funding. We get funded by some grants and private donors and some companies. And what we do is we bring a program to the school that does this. We take them to City Hall, or we bring them all the paperwork, or get them online, and they have to digest what it takes to start a business, be it a corporation, an S corporation, an LLC, an individual proprietorship, whatever it is that they need to do to understand that it is about business. Commandment number one in my program is get paid, because a lot of times, a lot of times people don't. They look at an artist or a musician, and they think it's all fun and games, and they're not willing to compensate musicians to perform. It's an age-old problem here, especially in certain areas of the country. But anyway, let me move forward and continue to explain the program. So what we do is we get the kids to understand what it is to start the business. They have to have a fictitious business name. They have to register a name, research it, and all that. then they have to actually, even if it's make believe, that they have to fill out all the paperwork and understand the process. Then what they do is after school we have a talent search, and we find the most talented kids in the school and sign them to a contract. They have to then digest that contract in order to, and so they're learning things, but at the same time they're recording. That we start recording day one. We kind of flip the script. We start with the fun stuff and then spoon feed them the business part. So by the end of the day, this is what they have to do. They have to produce a full-blown CD and video project, meaning that they get their artists, they develop the music, and figure out how many musicians or tracks they need to successfully produce a song. They go we have studios that we take them to that are industry standard studios that have great equipment and great facilities. And we take them to the bottom end studio so they can see the grassroots buttermilk bottom, because at the end of the day, whatever you have, that's what they have to use to get to the ultimate goal. And so then they produce the artists themselves with mentors next to them. They do the label copy. They do the publishing papers. They do the mechanical license agreements if we do any cover tunes. They have to manufacture the product. They have to do the line. They have to actually print it, package it, get the barcode, and shrink wrap it. And at the end of the day, they've gone from A to Z, from creating it, making sure that everything gets done. Same thing with the video. So I've successfully completed these things with the program here at McMain. We just mastered the CD a few days ago, and now we're finishing up the label stuff and liner notes and acknowledgments, blah 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 blah.
No,
blah,
listen.
blah.
I got a question for you. At the end of the day, are there testimonials to the success of keeping kids out of prison? Not just turning them into good citizens. I think that's the point here, man. I mean, I'm not a musician. I'm doing the show.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the point. But see, basically, like the thing about music, the music is science. It's not just music. It's mathematics.
Right.
It's language. It's travel. It's budgets. It's agreements. It's law. It's science. It's earth. It's wind. It's fire. It's God. It's medicine. It's psychologically rewarding, and I mean it's spiritual. Music is a mother.
It's a healer.
So,
it's a healer. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, let me ask you though. Can you talk about in not New Orleans, because New Orleans has a thriving live music scene, but how hard is it now that a lot of places in the country, a lot of the urban centers that used to house you guys for a month at a time, month engagement or hotels, like, there are no touring circuits anymore. So, I mean, it's really hard now just to get comfortable acquiring your own individual sound. That's my theory. I mean, I believe that we don't have individual sound because people don't have an opportunity to play live enough, especially in that setting. And I wanted to get your thoughts on the health of not the music business. It's not really an industry anymore, but just in general, like individuality, where are we at individualistically with music?
Well, one thing about, you was mentioning about New Orleans has is not necessarily talk about what's happening in New Orleans, because we have our own scene. There are many ills in the scene here in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
So don't think that I would have to say that every block has a good musician on it. I would have to say without a doubt there are so many talented people here, and it's because of culture. It's a cultural thing, right? Because there's so many cultural outlets that don't depend on somebody supporting it with record sales or downloads. It's not about that. It's about the culture, and it's about sustaining life as they know it. So no one can kill it. There are no record sales that can overcome the power of the music and culture here. So It doesn't matter whether they buy it or not. It's going on. I tell you, I mean, it's going to go on with a vengeance, okay?
Right.
Because it's culture. So, but let's speak about that. On the other hand, in other places in the country, listen, no one will ever stop music from thriving and innovations being made. That's an impossibility. The growth of art and music in America is very alive, and every generation or every so many years it takes on a new complexion. Back in the early 1900s, or even back into the 1800s or 1600s, to 1700s or whatever, this country, this whatever this is, it's had a diversity of cultures that have come together and rub elbows, be they abrasive or be they with love. You can't stop it. So and an artist's job is to express what he sees and feels in his environment. So our artists will never stop doing that, and even I don't care what we do, there will be some unforeseen development. Like we have the hip hop movement. Everybody predicted that it would only last a couple of months, and here we are 40-some years later, and it's still on the top of the charts.
Right.
So you can't predict what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. Then you can look at the technological advances. When I was a kid, there was, the technology in terms of recording. A person had a couple of microphones and a reel-to-reel tape, and if he had the ingenuity, he could create a good product. And then came some multi-track recordings that were affordable for the consumer, and then you have people doing 8 tracks. Well, Rick James became famous with an 8-track tape.
Right.
So, so then you have the invention of the sampler, which gave rise to the hip hop movement. It gave some kids in the ghetto the opportunity to sample bits and pieces of other people's performance and create a billion-dollar, multi-zillion-dollar industry that is now, there's not anything. In the beginning, it was considered trash music. It was considered ghetto music. It was considered music of ignorant black people, and now everybody and their mama is rapping. Okay, you can't turn on the TV without hearing the hip hop something. And actually, on Broadway right now, there's a hip hop play that has generated $57 million in advance ticket sales. Okay, and the play was written by a Hispanic guy.
Right.
So you know what I'm saying?
Well,
it's wide open.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I just like your attitude. I wanted to ask you. You are a percussionist, and I wonder. I know that it was hard enough for percussionists to get gigs, but every record I focus on in the early '70s has percussion on it. Sometimes multi-percussion and all different bandmates playing the percussion. And then after the drum machine came in, the elimination of the human seems like, and also on top of the fact that somehow that additional percussion seemed to disappear. We moved into disco. I wanted you to talk a little bit about that time period, not for you personally, because you were becoming a band leader, but also, is there any truth to the idea of the mechanization took away from additional percussion because it went away? I mean, I know it didn't really take away. If you look at the world at large and don't add America is a small percentage of the percussion world. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, percussion has never been respected here. And when you deal with what's called, they have a word for percussion in the symphony orchestras and those kind of so-called classical kind of situations. They call it legitimate percussion. Okay, they have a word that they call timpanis and glockenspiel and bells and vibraphones. They call that legitimate percussion. So what's the rest of it? Right.
What's the rest of it? So that's not a good terminology, because that means everything else is illegitimate.
Is there
not legitimate? Okay, so
yeah.
there's an issue with it, and it dates back to slavery. But in other countries, it's not unusual for the band leader to be a percussionist. Not at all. In Cuba, many band leaders are percussionists. In Brazil, in India, in Asia, in Africa, it's not unusual at all. It just so happens that the respect level here is not good. I often go on. For instance, I tell people this, and some of my constituents and friends don't like me to say it, but percussionists are the N-word of the music industry. We're the last one hired. We're the first one fired. Who are you going to get rid of, the bongo player or the bass player?
Right.
Okay? It's like that here. You see what I'm saying? There's a low understanding. In fact, they have a lot of guys that if they have a few dollars, they can go to any major music outlet and purchase all the percussion instruments they want and get some pretty cases, and all of a sudden the next day they're a percussionist. You see what I'm saying? You know, there's all kinds of things happening out there. But
Can I ask you? I want to ask you.
You made a good point about the machine. You said, did that machine affect the percussionist losing work? Let me tell you something. It was really the sequencer that made that happen. The sequencer sampler. The keyboard players took over. In the 70s, going into the 80s, it became the keyboard player's domain. You didn't even need a trap drummer. You didn't need a violin player. You didn't need horn players because everything was sampled and was accessible on a floppy disk that you could put into an emulator too, or any given technologically advanced device at that time, and have a complete orchestra at your fingertips. Okay, that's what happened. It didn't only affect the percussionists; it affected everybody that was playing in an instrument. Period. It wiped out a whole generation of actual people performing on their instrument.
Matt,
okay. Now,
I want to ask you. I want to come in. This is a dialogue. I want to ask you something about it goes back to slavery. The drum goes back to slavery. Can you cite? Can you talk at all as an ethnomusicologist about Congo Square, the validity of the communication that the slaves had? And how,
I can speak on.
I would like you to speak. I would like you to talk about specific stories. And even names or dates. I think this is absolutely essential.
Well, you have to understand. Number one, it wasn't called Congo Square, and for example, it was never called Congo Square. It was if the word would be pronounced Congo. Okay, it's just. A lot of things have happened, but let me tell you what that area was about.
Yeah.
In New Orleans, they call it back of town.
How do you spell it?
Okay. What, back of town?
Back of town. Okay, go ahead. Yeah,
back. It was in an area that they described as back of town.
Right on.
Or back of town. Okay, and it was an area where the Native American ethnic group, the Houma Indians, had their harvest festivals. It has always been a very spiritual area used for special occasions and events. Okay, so and during the days of slavery here in New Orleans, the slave owners felt it was to their advantage to allow the slaves some kind of freedom, some kind of, I wouldn't call it freedom, but I would say it was the opportunity to release some of the tension, to release some of the aggression,
right,
to release some of the despair. Okay, so what they would do is they'd open up this huge area, and there would be 300 to 600 enslaved people in this area every weekend. Okay, and it became a place of great importance for many reasons, because New Orleans is a port city, and that meant people were coming to New Orleans, and one of the points of interest was what happened in what they really call Place Congo. That's what it was called, Place Congo, or translated Congo Place.
Okay.
And later on, it became Congo Square when people they out of ignorance. Okay, so but at any rate,
what happened? What happened at that time?
What would happen? Well, what happened? Well, let's talk about what happened. Well, what happened in this place would be this: there were different ethnic groups. There were people from different areas of Africa that were enslaved here in Louisiana, and there were significant numbers of different ethnic groups where if you went into the center of Congo Place or Congo Square, as they call it, you would see this. You would see a group of musicians and dancers that were doing traditional Congolese dances and singing in Kikongo, okay? Mm-hmm. Or you would see people from Senegambia or different people from different ethnic groups, to the degree that people could determine the ethnicity of that particular ethnic group by their facial markings or the clothes that they adorn or the drums that they play or the songs that they sang.
Right.
So what would happen is that one ethnic group would play, and when they would subside, then another group of people who played an entirely different style of music to some degree would perform. And over a period of time, this is what happened. They began to trade they began to share these rhythms, which were already African rhythms, and they had a relationship in a relationship to each other already. They were already playing certain patterns that were indicative of their own music, because there was a certain amount of homogeneity in West African and Central African music. So there were similarities already. But here's what happened. Instruments like the banjo were created. Actually, the first actual trap set or drum set where a guy sat down and played a tenor drum, a bass drum, a snare drum, some cymbals, maybe some tom-toms, some Native American drums, and they still call them tom-toms today, that are used on the drum set.
Right.
That a person who sat down and played as a musician, playing all those instruments by himself. That was a product of Congo Square.
Wow.
It happened here first. And so all of those sounds, the horns, the zithers, the mbiras, the thumb pianos, as people call them, the mbira, the marimbula, and all kinds of instruments, the washboard, they already had instruments like that we use in the African setting. An amalgamation of all these things finally created what we call jazz. So, and the bulk of it, the nitty-gritty part came out of Congo Square. And if there was not a Congo Square, I doubt if we would have jazz.
Okay, and again, the density of your knowledge is fantastic, and again, one of these overlays that sort of lies on the surface for my generation and younger generations is this idea that the Louisiana Purchase was made in a sense because there was, people were forming. It was becoming a bit of a revolt against the French. French couldn't handle it, and the colonials were brought into because their tactics were harsher and they clamped down on the drumming. Can you talk about that at all?
Oh, well, let's talk about that. Number one person to talk about is Toussaint Louverture, who overthrew the French in Haiti. Okay, so here you have some barefooted, no clothes wearing, enslaved people who had still retained their African spiritualism and their warriorship, who would not be denied, and they went up against the French, and of course you must realize that voodoo, hoodoo, and all of that a lot of that came from Haiti to New Orleans.
Right,
okay,
right.
And that was one of the ways that Toussaint overthrew the French. He used psychology, he used spiritualism, he used the knife, the gun, and then the rocks, the stones, the dirt, the trees, whatever he could to fight the oppression that he faced. Well, the same thing happened here when that happened in the Caribbean. It sent a ripple through all of slaveholding America and anywhere else, the Caribbean, the West Indies. It struck fear into the hearts of those people who owned slaves. Okay, and as time went on with the slaves, say in Place Congo or Congo Square, as time went on, whites became increasingly suspicious and afraid of reprisal. There was a huge revolt here where not only enslaved people, but even some plantation owners joined the slaves, white plantation owners, joined the slave revolt to try to squelch it. Okay, so I think that had a lot to do with the demise of Congo Square. It was fear. Let me tell you something else.
Go ahead.
Let me tell you something really
also,
important.
listen, I want to tell you, speak like this into the phone, because when you go on speaker, it's very hard to hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like to hear your voice right up on the phone. Yeah,
you probably can hear me better now.
Now you sound good.
Yeah. So listen, every day that the enslaved people went to Congo Square on the weekend or Sunday or whatever, they had a signal when they had to go back to their respective plantation or home. And you know what the signal was?
No.
It was a cannon. That was the signal to end your day, your pleasure, your joy. You hear a cannon. Bam. Time to go. It's just that fact lets you know how severe this slave thing was. That you were signaled to flee, and get back to where you needed to be post haste. Bam. So it was already fear. But the other thing about Place Congo Square is many business deals got struck there because it was a point of interest for not only the slaves, the enslaved, but the people who subjugated them. Right. It was also a place where sailors came and businessmen came to strike deals and enter in passage agreements. You know what a passage agreement is?
No, I know. Go ahead. Explain.
A passage agreement is between a Southern white gentleman and a Creole lady, because many of the white gentlemen, so-called gentlemen, during slavery had two families: a white family on one side of town and a black family on the other side, and it was something that was accepted.
Most or just upper class.
All of these kind of things were going on in Congo Square. A lot of business.
But I think at the core, it was also this regional bias of not wanting any kind of. I mean, jazz came. The music, I mean, the strivers, the beboppers, the guys like Dizzy Bird, those guys, it all bled out of that. And so it was seen.
This is true.
And what I'm trying to say is it's amazing how it was able, because of the authenticity of the music, it stood the test of time in some ways. Although you go back to what you said earlier about, orchestras now, they don't consider timbales or congas, bongos, tablas, percussion. It's beneath them. So it's like, have we?
No, they consider percussion, but it's not legitimate.
I don't know what that means,
though.
It doesn't fit into a more westernized European classical setting. I mean, to me, it's like very frustrating to not have that stuff. It was here at one time, and it was very vibrant, and it really was when you were first coming of age. I wanted to ask you about how you met Ndugu Chancellor.
Oh, well, going to L.A., if you're in L.A. for any length of time, you're going to meet everybody. You know, especially since I was playing with Herbie Hancock. When I got with Herbie, I had to be around 21 or 22. And I started visiting him at his home in Hollywood. And, of course, being around Herbie Hancock, that was like the top of the heap. That was right next to the Quincy Joneses. And
yeah, you were prime time.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm there, and there's no doubt if we played at the Roxy or the Troubadour, I'm gonna meet everybody within the night. I'm gonna meet who gobs of people. So and Dougal was one of the people that I met. And Dougal worked with George Duke a lot.
No, I way back when I started my career about almost 5 years ago. I mean, guys like John Hurd and Dugu and George Duke, they were some of my first interviews. And but then I run into your albums as a leader, and I'm like, he produced some of your albums. So I'm like, I just want to know about any times that the first time you guys got together to play. And that.
I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even remember.
Right.
The first time.
But it's, you know what, more to the point.
We played together so many times. Right. I can't remember. I can't even remember the first time we met. And Dougal was involved in so many things, and when you're in L.A. at that time, especially 70s and 80s, you're in L.A. and you're doing studio work, which is not like it's a great deal different now than it was back then, but I'm running into these guys on a daily basis. I'm seeing Harvey Mason at recording sessions. I'm seeing Wawa Watson. I'm seeing Wayne Shorter. I'm with Herbie. I'm with Freddie Hubbard. I'm with George Cables, and I'm with Joe Henderson, and I'm seeing Joe Sample and playing with him. And I mean, it was just a time and period where there was plethora of clubs and places and things to do and places to go and musicians, Jocko and Joe Zawinu, and I could go on and on.
Yeah, I mean, it's
people on a daily basis.
Well, no, I mean, it comes down to. I wanted to know, the question I had for you was I want you to tell the audience the story of the day that Herbie saw you playing. And and I really want to know how that, because I mean, everybody had their own matriculation. I mean, Paul, I talked to him. I know Harvey was the first drummer in the Headhunters, but he was rocking out the studio scene in LA, so he went down there. Herbie was pretty much financially broke at that point in his life, and he told Mike Clark, I can't pay you a whole bunch of money even at that time, but we can tour the world and we can have a ball, and let's do it, and so they went. And
is this something you did out of his memoirs?
No, on my own work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what I'm trying, I have not read his book. I do my own journalism.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say, I want I know he saw you, and I talked to. I just wanted to know how that evolved.
I'll tell you how that happened. I was a student. I'm going to tell you a bit. I need to give you some pre-roll before I get to how we met.
Yeah.
I was in Detroit. I was born and raised in Detroit and in Louisiana, but I went to school in Detroit. And when I was a high school student, I dropped out of high school, and I went to work at a racetrack, and I won a race called the Daily Double. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Well, I thought we may have been disconnected. So anyway, I won this race called the Daily Double. And I had maybe, when the horse came in and won, I was a busboy in the clubhouse. I had about 50 dishes and glasses on a tray. I threw them up in the air. I flipped everybody off, and I took my money, and I got a plane ticket to California. And that was the greatest thing that ever happened in my life. If I didn't win that race, I would have never met Herbie Hancock.
Wow.
I would have never gone to California. I may have gone, but I would. It was a magical thing that happened.
Right.
When I got to California, after I was there for several months, I was told if I was a resident of California, I could go to a college, a junior college, free. And I didn't have a diploma, so that was an issue. Some people helped me. I got in a junior college. I applied for UC Berkeley. My grades, I had a good grade point average. I applied for UC Berkeley. I got accepted. And that's where I met Herbie Hancock. I had a group that I had put together that did traditional African, Brazilian, Cuban, Haitian music. It was dancers and drummers and singers.
Wait. This is what I want to know about. So what was the name of that band?
It was called Bata Koto.
Okay, and I want to know. I would like
Koto, and we opened for Herbie. There was a new arts museum on the campus they were opening, and they had invited Herbie to mainline a performance, and I was the support act. I was a sophomore, or probably a junior or senior in college, and after the performance, Mr. Hancock approached me about coming to sit in with him in a nightclub that he was performing at in San Francisco. I think it was the Jazz Workshop. I think it was. And actually, when I went he said, well, bring a few instruments. And so I did that. Now, let me tell you something that happened that's really funny. I got to the club that night, and I'm like 21 years old, and I'm excited as hell because I'm going to sit in with Herbie Hancock. This is a big deal.
That's a big deal, man.
For me.
Yeah.
So I brought 2 conga drums and a little bag of percussion, and I didn't put this stuff on the stage. I put it on the side of the stage. I wasn't so presumptuous as to put it on the stage. I didn't know where to put it. So I put my stuff on the side of the stage, and this was like maybe an hour or so before the show was to start, and Herbie walked in the door. And when he was walking through the club and he glanced over at the stage, he saw my percussion, and he says, what's all this I won't complete the word, but he said, what's all this stuff over here?
Right.
And I looked, he walked to the back, and I went over to my instruments, I picked my stuff up, and I left. And I didn't sit in with him that night. He never knew I was there. 6 months later, he came back to UC Berkeley, to the campus, and he came to give a lecture in the music department, and I was the teacher's assistant for the professor in that class. And I was asked to pick Herbie up and bring him to the class. So I went in a car to pick him up, and on the way up to the class, he was, like, well, have we met before? Blah, blah, blah. I was like kind of brushing him off because I didn't really consider him a good guy at that point.
Right. This is great. Yeah.
So anyway, here's how it ended. Before the day was out, we had a conversation about what happened. And he said, I did that. And I said, yeah, I think it was Herbie Hancock. and he said, well, why don't you come play with me tonight?
Right.
So I did, and actually sat in with him that night. And then a few weeks later, he asked me to come to Santa Monica. I actually came and sat. I actually sat in with the band again several other times. I didn't know I was being auditioned, but I guess I was. And he asked me to come and perform with him in Santa Monica. It was the first time he was going to pay me to play. The other times I just came and sat in.
Right.
So I was excited about that. And I actually can put this man down as a credit once I perform with him and I get paid. That's a different level. So he said at that point he had a band called Sexton with Billy Hart, Buster Williams, Julian Priester, Eddie Henderson, and Pat Gleason.
Dr. Gleason, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, when I got to Santa Monica, I figured that's the band that I would be playing with. I was just going to be playing in the band with those guys. And when I got to the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium and I got to the stage, I was there before anyone else, and all I saw on the stage was a grand piano and a harp. And I was like, well, and then Herbie walked in, and I said, well, Herbie, where's the band? He said, the band is me, you, and Alice Coltrane. and that was it. That was my first real gig with him.
Yeah. Listen, my mind was just blown. I got a piece of music I want to play for you, and then we'll come back and break it down.
All right.
Feinberg Show brought to you in part by the Stereo Hospital, the Circle Tree Ranch, Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and the Jewish Community Center of Southern Arizona. We appreciate their support. All right, Mr. Summers, what do you got for us, brother? What's that from?
What was that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, that
what
was
that?
Yeah, I don't know what track it was, but it's off the album "Jewel of the Lotus." In the Lotus.
Oh,
Benny,
you know what? I thought that's what it was from, but I didn't hear the Benny's horn come in.
Exactly. Well, no, I mean, this was I played it. It was Buster Williams on bass. I think it was Billy Hart, but maybe Freddie. I don't know what Freddie Waits was playing, but then you were in there playing
definitely
percussion. Just yeah, and I
was suspecting that's what that was from Jewel in the Lotus.
A lot of times I play tunes and the main leader's not on the track, so there's no way you would have known that. But I'm just saying how did you can you talk about when you guys were just in that groove, be it the studio or in a live setting, well, no, specifically in the studio, how you recorded that music? Was it all done live with you guys together, or were you overlaying stuff?
Well, man, you know, it's hard to remember those sessions. I mean, you know, I've done so many recording sessions. I'm just trying to think.
Yeah.
I think we did a lot of live stuff. If you know, but I couldn't swear to it. I really couldn't. I know that I did do some overdubbing, which is overlaying, as you called it.
Right.
Which means that I played we did do it live, and we did it. I think I don't even know if I did any overdubbing. We may have done all of that live. I do think we did it all live.
Right. Yeah. No. And specifically, so you show up. I mean, you were playing ancient flutes when Herbie first saw you in that band in Berkeley.
No, but you know, I was professionally a saxophonist in the Flowers before I was a percussionist. Before I went totally into being strictly a percussionist, it happened because of an incident at the Apollo Theater.
Go ahead.
And what happened was, this is how I became, you know, primarily a percussionist. I was in my senior year in college. I wanted to really figure out if I could really be a professional musician. I was playing in bands, but I wanted to test the waters, so I drove across the country. And since I was raised in Detroit, I thought I could walk into Motown and get some work. I couldn't even get in to see the receptionist. But I did. Yeah. I did meet a guy named Harvey Fuqua.
Oh my God!
Who was married to Berry Gordy's sister, and he had a band, and he heard me playing flute. I came to visit some friends that were in this band called New Birth, and he said, "Man, if you could make it to New York City, you can play on this RCA record that I'm recording with the band."
Oh my! What New Birth album is that? I need to know that right away.
It's called Birthday.
Oh, are you credited? Birthday. Are you credited on the back of that album?
I'm not on. I think so. I guess.
Okay,
so Fuqua in so many years. I don't know.
Fuqua he heard you play. He's like, I want you to play flute, or you also play percussion.
No, I was playing woodwinds. I was at a rehearsal at the band leader's house, and I was just sitting in. We were just hanging out, and I was playing sax and flute. And Harvey Fuqua walked in, and he said, "Hey, flute." He called me Fluteski. He said, "Hey, Fluteski, come here." And he said, "Man, if you could make it to New York, I could put you on this recording." Wow. So I said, "Well, yeah, well, I'll be there." And because that's why I left Berkeley to see if I could if I could actually be a musician and go to New York and do something. So here it is. I'm going to Detroit to try to get into Motown now. I'm going to New York to play in the studio with this band, and I'm going to get paid. I mean, it was great. And I had a Volkswagen, but I had no starter in the car. I mean, I actually had to push my car to get it started. But I had it full of instruments. I had percussion instruments, and I had my saxophone. I had an alto sax, a tenor, wow, a C flute, and an alto flute. And they were all high-quality instruments, very expensive. And I got a job at the Apollo Theater playing saxophone and flute with New Birth. And then I got a job with Bobby Womack playing percussion.
Oh man, are you? Wait! Wait a minute.
No,
hold
when
on.
I was on stage, wait. When I was on stage with Bobby Womack, someone stole all of my horns, and that meant that I was now solely a percussionist. So now, what were you going to ask me?
No, because I wanted to be clear that you had a gig at the Apollo, and then so big acts that would come in like Womack, New Birth. I mean, was that like when acts would come in, you would be the percussionist, or was anybody in the city at the time, and you were playing with them consistently?
No, I just happened to be there. I was passing through town. I was only there because Harvey Fuqua invited me to come to New York and record with New Birth. So when we recorded New Birth, that's a record called Birthday, I played a flute solo on a record on a tune called Theme from Buck and the Preacher.
So I was
playing horns. I played horns.
Yeah.
A horn player that can play percussion was a novelty, and it was also a way to get work. I could do more than one thing.
I want to get the timeline straight here. How old were you when you first met Herbie? It was in your senior year of undergraduate school. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. It was at 19.
And I was at that particular time because I quit high school and worked for a period of time. By the time I got to be a senior, I was 21 years old. I guess that's pretty much on time. 21, 22.
Yeah, but I mean
like
that's that. I guess and that was in 1969.
That had to be 1971.
1970. So the first time when Herbie came in, sort of, said "What the F" to your percussion, and you bounced out of there. That was in 71, and then you did not connect with him again until the Alice Coltrane concert. I just want to get the timeline.
No. What happened was after he came to the campus. And I went to sit in with him,
right.
and I took my instruments out. Maybe 6 or 7, 8 months later, he came to the campus again to do a lecture, and that's when I met up with him again.
Right.
It may have been a year later, but it was some time passed, and then he asked me to come in to sit in with him, and then for months after that, I would come in and periodically sit in with him, with the band Sexton, with Billy Hart and all those guys, and then sometime after that, because Headhunters, the record Headhunters was not recorded until 1973.
That's right.
Okay, so there was a period, there was a span of time, a year and a half or so, that I was kind of dabbling with Herbie, in and out, and then just before he started the Headhunter band, I was invited to play with him, and that's when I played with him and Alice Coltrane. That was the timeline, but the opportunity with New Birth came before Herbie.
Absolutely, exactly, and so that was in the interim period when you kind of just left high school before you went to college. Yeah,
I dropped out of high school and went to work.
Right, yeah,
that's what happened there.
Right,
and then went to college after. I mean, I was out of high school for over a year before I went to college.
Right.
I went to California and I didn't have a diploma. I never graduated out of high school, period, to this day. Okay? I don't have a high school diploma. And that's one thing that's very important for young people to understand. I could give a damn about a diploma because people buy them. People cheat.
Yeah.
People steal.
Sure.
It's knowledge that gets you where you're going, and your own ingenuity and your own ambition and your own energy. Nothing can stop you if you have a degree or not. My father used to say, if you had a cure for cancer, it would care if you had a degree or not. As long as you have the cure, as long as you know what you know. When I dropped out of high school, my father didn't say a word to me. I asked him 6 months later why he didn't complain, because he always expressed a desire for us to complete our education. He said that's what his answer was. If you had a cure for cancer, they wouldn't care. Just do what you got to do.
We're gonna. I have one more question for you as we wrap up. We got really locked in today, Bill. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your collaboration with Alan Toussaint.
Oh, you say collaboration?
Well, I think in general, like if you can,
me and Alan?
let me rephrase that. That was sloppy. Stepping back from it all, his contributions and significance to American music.
Of Alan Toussaint?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, I definitely had an opportunity to get to know him and work with him many times, especially before Hurricane Katrina. He owned a studio here called, what was it called? It was called
Seaside. Seaside.
Pardon me?
Is it called Seaside? Seaside Records.
Seasaint
Records.
Seasaint. No, Seasaint.
Seasaint. That's right.
Yeah, and I recorded him many times. I met him and his son Reggie, and so when I became a permanent fixture here in New Orleans, I had an opportunity to record for him, because on a percussion level, when it came to do what I do, there weren't any people in the city that did exactly what could do what I do specifically. Of course, percussion is a major part of brass bands here and certain types of music. But then my specialty is world percussion,
Mm-hmm.
So he based upon my reputation and having played with Herbie, it was pretty easy for me to melt into the music scene. I came with credentials. So I spent a lot of time around this man. And on many occasions, in fact, performed on many concerts, either with him or my band next to his band. And he was like Quincy Jones of New Orleans.
Right.
Okay, so there it is. I can say no more than that, because as far as I'm concerned, Quincy is the czar, and Alan Toussaint was very much the Pope. Okay,
right.
He was the Pope.
The Pope. I like that. He's the Pope. Yeah, right. You're giving these guys different label. But I mean, can you give an example of his transcendent quality? What made him a special figure?
I would have to say, his compositional skills, because he wrote many great hits, and he worked with greats like Fats Domino and Irma Thomas, and wrote hits for her, which were like major hits back in the day, R&B hits.
Sure.
Or what I would call them rock and roll hits, because it's funny. People think that when they hear the word rock and roll, they think of the great. They think of, let me say, the other bands. Rock and roll. They may even think of Elvis Presley. But when I was growing up, rock and roll was not even a term used in the white community. It was a word for R&B. It was pre-R&B, really. Rock and roll.
What did they use? What did they say?
Pardon me?
What would they say? What was the term they used?
What was the term? It was rock and roll. I don't know what they use, because listen, you have to understand. Come on, wait a minute. Let's get this straight. But let's really deal with that issue. You have to understand this is so important.
It is.
African American expression musically, like these contributions that this specific ethnic group made to certain area of the arts. Okay, and it's like it's not about race; it's about facts. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to learn Eskimo music, please go to the Eskimo. Okay, it's real simple. It's not about race; it's just about geographics and where things are happening on the planet and who innovates them. So, for instance, back in the day when Count Basie and Duke Ellington were walking the streets, who was the king of swing? Do you know?
Both of them.
No. There was specifically one person that was named the king of swing. Do you know who it is?
Who? Tell me the two guys again.
Okay. Duke Ellington and Count Basie were walking the streets.
Basie.
Performing and composing. Who was the king of swing while they were in their heyday?
Basie was swing.
So you don't know. That's something you're gonna have to go through with your
musings.
With your
I did.
But no, okay. Let me ask you another question. When Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry were walking the streets, who was the king of rock and roll?
Dude, Chuck Berry.
Elvis Presley.
You didn't say Presley. You said Bo Diddley and
No, I said when Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry were walking the streets, who was the king of rock and roll?
Elvis Presley.
Exactly.
Right. Well, I'm not. This is not in my wheelhouse, man. Summers, I'm off in the. To me, I'm marinating in that African band at Berkeley. That band, that's where my pocket is, and I wasn't even around at that time. But the open-mindedness was incredible, man. And the truth is that Toussaint, you were about to go off and talk about his influence on white rock, and I look at people.
Well, the thing about it is there's some confusion about what happened here, historically, and who did what, when, and where. So, but listen, let's not diminish his importance by talking about anything that might be politically challenging
it's okay.
to prove or whatever.
Yeah.
He was a great man. I knew him as a person. He was a very soft-spoken, mild-mannered giant.
Yeah, right.
He was a giant of a man who was really supportive of his community and actually helped create a genre of music that it will withstand the test of time. Period.
What is that genre?
He's like the pyramids. You ain't gonna destroy it.
What genre did he create?
Well, he definitely helped in the genre called R&B and rock and roll.
Right.
He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So
gumbo.
But he also in traditional New Orleans style music, he's a main person. He's a part of a sound that represents New Orleans and the state of Louisiana and America. He is a part of a sound. It's like the Neville Brothers are part of that sound. Just like James Andrews, Trombone Shorty, Herlin Riley, Harry Connick. There's so many people that have contributed, to that sound. Professor Longhair, Buddy Bolden, Jelly Roll Morton, Louis Armstrong. He's a part of that hierarchy. He is the Pope. The Pope just died. Okay, there'll be no one to replace him.
Also, I want one more thing before I let you go. So the timeline, I talked to Ellis Marsalis, another part of that beautiful gumbo down there in New Orleans. I did about 4 hours of interviews with him, and he said that originally there was Race Records, and then eventually,
yes.
Okay, so it was called Race Records, and then it was an offensive term, so it was a lawsuit of some kind, so they changed the term to R&B, okay? And
we can talk about that now. We need to get a few facts straight on that issue. Where did this term race music come from? Because number one, these reporting magazines that had charts like Cashbox and these other magazines that were industry magazines, they didn't have a place on the charts for black music, so they put it in the back of the book and they called it race music. Okay. That's where that's the real deal. That's where that was. You could find that if you look on and do a little research. You can look in the back of Billboard or whatever it was, a Cash Box, and these magazines. And because they didn't want to recognize African American artists, they had a specific category that they put us under called race music. That's what I know about it.
Right. Oh, I mean, it's. I'm just when Elvis first started singing, they thought he was. All right. Yeah, we're gonna. Actually, you know what, Bill? We got to jump, man. I will do this again real soon. It was truly an honor. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a pleasure to, hanging out with you and talking to you. You're a good guy, yeah,
and you're doing something to keep the music alive. You're an important equation and factor to this, and with our support from every community, be it Hispanic or white or black, African, Asian, Episcopalian, Jewish, Muslim, we all got to come together to create some value for our children and to keep the music alive. That's it.
Humanity.
Period.
Humanity. All right, brother.
Yes, exactly.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Yep. Cheers.